Good afternoon. Welcome to this ACER webinar on the amendments to the electricity balancing platforms. My name is Mathieu Fransen. I'm leading the market coach team within ACER, and I will be doing this webinar today with my colleague Gilles Bertrand, who will present most of the content parts. Very happy to see so many of you joining today, and we hope we can give you good content input to the ongoing consultation we're currently running. So, a bit of the agenda. Today we'll start with some introductory remarks and background on the process, and then we'll run through the 4 topics that are also part of the public consultation in a bit of a different order, and then we'll break in between for 2 Q&A sessions. In terms of housekeeping, you can put your questions in the Slido tool. The link is in the chat, so please do not put any questions in the chat itself, but use the Slido tool. And if you go there, you can put your question in, and we'll deal with them in the Q&A sessions. Also, the other people are invited to have a look at the Slido and indeed vote on the questions they think are most interesting. And we'll take the questions in the order of importance, or in the order of votes. The meeting will be recorded. Please keep your microphone muted unless the chair gives you the floor. And the slides and recording of the webinar will be uploaded to the ACER website after the webinar. So any substance-related question will be addressed during the relevant Q&A session, as said. But indeed, you can also put them in the Slido already during the presentation, for which we kindly invite you to do that. So then on some introductory remarks. Maybe it's good to begin a bit with the background of this webinar today. It's about the European balancing platforms, and those platforms, they are based in the EB regulation. The EB regulation governs the time frame on both balancing capacity procurement, balancing energy market, and imbalance settlement. So from years to hours before real time, indeed about the last hour before real time, and indeed imbalance settlement about the settlement being done after real time. We'll focus today on this intermediate part, the last hour, so where balancing energy is being procured by TSOs, and indeed the European balancing platforms allow TSOs to procure these energy bids at a lower price or more efficiently than if they would do this alone. The European balancing platform for the exchange of balancing energy, and indeed for the imbalance setting process, are governed by a number of ACER decisions. I've listed there on the right. I won't read them out, all of them, but indeed around a number of implementation frameworks for each platform, a decision on the pricing, and decisions on how TSOs settle the exchange energy between them. If I go to indeed look a bit more specific on balancing energy markets, so in this last hour, those integrated balancing markets function. They exchange different type of reserves. So indeed both automatic and manual fixed restoration reserves and so-called replacement reserves, which although are not used by all the TSOs across Europe. And indeed the imbalance netting process, which is indeed applied all across continental Europe, avoiding the simultaneous activation of aFRR in different TSO areas. So the main principles for the exchange of balancing is that it is built on a TSO to TSO model. This TSO TSO model basically means that market participants bidding for balancing energy do not provide the bids directly to the platform, but provide this to their national TSO, and the national TSOs then cooperate among themselves to ensure this exchange in an efficient way. With the bids provided to each TSO, there's common merit order list created for balancing energy standard bids, and indeed then subsequently those balancing energy bids are exchanged and priced, and for the pricing, marginal pricing is the applied methodology. So independently of the different balancing processes, these principles and functions of the platform are the same. A bit on these functions. So the balancing energy platform is performed by a number of functions that operate the platform. The first one is the activation optimization function. This is the one that looks at all the bids, looks at the demand of individual TSOs, and then decides which bids should be selected as providing the lowest cost solution for balancing energy. Then the capacity management function. This is the function that looks at cross-zone capacity between the TSOs and optimizes and updates the available capacity in case of an activation. And then the third one is the TSO settlement function, which settles the used balancing energy between the TSOs when the exchange has happened, in order for each TSO to correctly reflect the cost of balancing in their national systems and imbalance settlement subsequently. On the bottom, you see this visualized in a graph. Indeed, TSO demand, BSP bids, and cross-zonal capacity all going into this AOF, and indeed selected bids coming out, being activated. Gilles will say something more about this, how this works in practice, and indeed, and subsequently, the cost of those exchanges are settled between the TSOs at the relevant balancing energy prices. So, what has happened since the go live of the European platforms in the course of the last year? A number of TSOs joined, mainly the German TSO, Austrian and Czech Republic, and indeed also the Italian TSO until recently. And in the 2023 report, we looked at the first period of the TSOs operating the platform. And we mainly looked at a number of price incidents. So price incidents defined in the previous pricing decision as being periods or longer or shorter periods where the price is at least above 50% of the transitional price limit that was set in the previous ACER decision. This 7,500 megawatt hour was then indeed used for TSO's obligation to report regularly on those incidents. And these are basically the numbers, the time at which those percentages happened in the aFRR platform, the PICASSO platform. So in the end, there are price incidents. If you look at the total amount of time, it's not that much, but they do happen. And indeed, in the market integration report, we looked into what's the underlying nature of those incidents. Indeed, those price incidents may be short, but they are often part of a longer lasting process. So if short incidents happen, they might repeat themselves, and indeed might then later on lead to a longer imbalance and a longer need. It also, as such, it indeed indicates that some incidents might be more efficiently solved not by aFRR but by mFRR, which is usually a more slower reserve. But if in the end the imbalances persist, then maybe a choice to activate mFRR is a more efficient one than using the expensive aFRR. So during those price incidents, indeed large price differences are indeed observed between bidding zones. And indeed also during those price incidents, only few cross-border exchanges take place. And indeed our conclusion there is indeed increasing the amount or the possibility of exchange between different TSOs in balancing energy would be indeed the main and a very efficient way to reduce the impact of those price incidents on consumers. Thereby, indeed, also our main recommendation is, well, the implementation of the platform and the use of the platform by all TSOs across Europe would be the main solution, because by its nature, it would make sure that there's more exchanges possible between the different TSOs. So that was my introduction. I will now give the floor to my colleague, Gilles Bertrand, who will tell you a bit more about the decision and indeed the processes leading towards that. Gilles, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew, for the introduction. So then indeed on the process of the decision. So ENSO is submitted on the 7th of February 2024 the old TSO proposal for the second amendment to the aFRR implementation framework and the second amendment to the balancing pricing methodology. In terms of timeline, so I said we get the proposal from all TSO on 7th of February. Then we had some interaction with NRAs and TSOs in March and in April. We also launched a public consultation on 26th of March, and it will go until 23rd of April. And today we are having the public workshop to explain a bit what's the content of the amendment and what are the questions we are consulting on. Then in May, we will have the last interaction with TSOs and we will finalize the methodology. And we are planning to ask the BR for opinion in June, and we will publish the decision as soon as we have the positive opinion from the BOR. And the legal deadline for the process was, it was a 6-month process, so the legal deadline is 7th of August. So what we are consulting on 4 topics. So the first one is the possibility for TSO to use an elastic demand for aFRR. The second one is an alternative way to compute the cross-border marginal price for aFRR that has been developed by TSO. The third topic is about transitional and technical price limits. And the last topic is about the development of an adjustment mechanism to the harmonized maximum and minimum prices for balancing energy. So then the first topic I said is the possibility for TSO to use an elastic demand, and we will look at how would that function and what would be the impact on price incidents that have taken place in the past. So first, a bit of background on balancing capacity procurement. So TSO need to procure balancing capacity in order to balance the system in real time. And so that's basically explained in the aFRR dimensioning rules, and that's basically governed by Article 157 of ACER. And what says there is that, and that's what we illustrate on the left graph, is that TSO need to have enough balancing capacity to cover their imbalance for at least 99% of the time. So if you look on the left graph, the distribution of the system imbalance, the amount of reserve that TSO needs to have available, which is the dimension need, it should be sufficient to cover their 99% of their system imbalance. And so this amount of balancing capacity, what does it guarantee? It guarantees a sufficient frequency quality. And that was also already before the existence of the platform. So what that means is that this requirement is sufficient in terms of frequency quality, even though a TSO does not access the merit order of other TSO. But then with the platform, we have a change, because with the connection to PICASSO, TSO can improve their frequency quality by accessing the merit order of other TSO. And so there, what we can conclude from that is that there shall be no obligation to improve the frequency quality, because what's required in SOGL is to have this dimension need available. There is no need to go above that. It should not be mandatory for system security to go above that. And so what TSO have been developing for solving that, basically the proposal is to have the possibility for them to use an elastic demand for aFRR, meaning that they can have a price for part of their demand, and there are some other limitations. And so what you see here on the left graph is that basically that's the TSO demand, and that you can split it into 3 parts. So you first have the dimension need. So that's the part that we discussed before. So that's the part that they need to have available. And so for that part, the requirement is that that part of the demand shall be inelastic, because that has been explained, that the part is really needed for having a sufficient frequency quality. And then you have the 2 other parts of the demand, which are in orange, the part that can be satisfied with non-contracted bid locally, and the white part that cannot be satisfied locally. And for these 2 parts, the idea is that, as I said before, these parts are not strictly needed for operational security. And so for that, TSO can put a price above which they are not willing to improve their frequency quality. And our initial assessment on that is that this measure would allow TSO to better reflect the trade-off between extra cost and better frequency quality, and would therefore improve system efficiency. And now we have 2 slides about what would be the impact of this measure. And so as a test case, we have taken Italy. And so for Italy, what we have been observed while looking in the data is that price incidents mainly take place when they exhaust their full merit order, and they also exhaust the Austrian one. And this situation is basically happening if they have ATC that goes to Austria, but not after to Germany or Czech Republic. And so in this situation of price incidents, that's why on the left graph, we have represented in blue the Italian merit order there, in orange the Austrian one, and in green is the combined merit order if you aggregate the bids of both countries. And so this green merit order is somehow the merit order that you see from Italy in the situation where you have a price incidence. And I also show on the graph in red the dimension need for Italy. And so what we show on the next graph is what would be the impact of the use of an elastic demand. So in blue, what we show here is that the merit order here is exactly the combined merit order that was in the slide before. And in the current situation, what you can see is that this is the orange curve. If the demand exceeds this amount of bids that are available, then you will activate all the bids in Italy and all the Austrian one, and so you will have a price that is set by the highest bid in Austria. That's the red clearing point. So that's the current situation. And what would be possible with the elastic demand is that Terna would still have to put the first part until this red dashed line, this high horizontal line, green line at the price limit. But then for the part that is exceeding this red dashed line, they will be able, that's the second horizontal segment, green, they will be able to put a price for that part. And so that would allow them to not activate the most expensive bid from Austria if it's not really needed for system security reason. And so if they would apply this in this way, that's expected to prevent a large portion of price incidents that have taken place in Italy in the past. So then the second topic that is there is the alternative way to compute the cross-border marginal price. So here we have a graphical representation for this. So in the lower left part, we have the aFRR demand that TSO will submit to the platform. This will be based on the physical measurement they make. And so these aFRR demands of all TSO and the merit orders, they go to the activation optimization function that will basically redispatch the demand that will basically optimize how to satisfy the demand of TSO at the cheapest cost by rearranging the demand between the different TSOs. And that activation optimization function will also compute the cross-border marginal price based on the bids that it selects. And so you have as their output this cross-border marginal price and this corrected demand. And then after that, this corrected demand of TSO goes through their national TSO controller that will, and so how does that work? Basically, it works a bit like it's a control system. So it works a bit like a cruise control in a car that somehow brings back the speed of the car to the required level. The TSO controller does the same thing, but it basically activates BSP bids in order to bring back the power imbalance to zero. So it's a control model. And so that basically activated bids, and that triggers delivery of BSP that influence the physical output for the aFRR demand for the next 4 seconds. And so what's interesting to see in this graph actually is the part that is in blue in it, is that there might be a discrepancy between the bids that are selected by the activation optimization function, which set the cross-border marginal price, and the bids that are really activated by the TSOs. And this is mainly due to the fact that there is a delay in the TSO controller for stability reasons. And so the fact that we have this discrepancy can create issues because the price, here the cross-border marginal price, can be set by a bid that is selected by the OF, but that is not activated by the TSO, in fact. And so this is basically what happened, and that has been realized. This is often what happened for short price incident, where the expensive bid is often not activated by the TSO controller. And so therefore, it also does not deliver any energy. And so we try now to illustrate on the next graph what's the TSO proposal on the example, and also re-show how the current situation works. So this example is based on the situation where we have 2 LFC areas, so LFC area 1 on the left and LFC area 2 on the right. And so for both of them, you can see they have a merit order in orange, and then they have a volume of selected bids in the AOF in blue, and the volume activated by the TSO controller in green. And so in the left one, if you look at it, you see that the volume that is selected by the OF is higher than the volume that is actually activated, and that if you look at the highest bid that is selected by the OF, this is the blue clearing dot in the left graph, and this is at 10,000 euro per megawatt hour. If you look at the highest bid selected by the TSO controller, then you get 1,000 euro per megawatt hour. And on the right graph, you can see that you get the highest bid selected by the OF is equal to the highest bid activated by the TSO controller, and it's at 1,500 euro per megawatt hour. And so now if we have this setting basically, and we look at the current situation, the cross-border marginal price is set at the highest bid selected by the AF, so that's the current situation. Then what you will take is the highest bid that is selected, so the highest blue clearing point, and that is 10,000 euro per megawatt hour. And as explained before, so this bid actually in this situation is not activated by the TSO controller. So the price is set by a bid that the TSO controller does not activate, and so also does not deliver anything. And what TSO proposed, that's on the right part here, is that the cross-border marginal price would be set at the maximum on all LFC area of the uncongested area of the minimum between the highest selected bid by the OF and the highest bid activated by the TSO controller. So the idea there is that we look for each LFC area, what is the minimum between this green and blue clearing point. So in this case, it's the green one, which is at 1,000 euro per megawatt hour. In this, on the right part is the two are equal, so it's at 1,500 euro per megawatt hour. And so you will take the maximum on both LFC areas. So in this case, it's the maximum between 1,000 and 1,500 euro per megawatt hour. So you will get a clearing price of 1,500 euro per megawatt hour. And so this approach can also be interpreted as setting the cross-border marginal price at the highest bid that is both selected by the activation optimization function and activated by the TSO controller. And so on the graph after, we have also a bit of illustration. This is a graph that was presented by TSO at MESC on how would that work in practice. And you can see here in blue, that's how the price would be set for in the current situation, and in orange, it's how the price would be set with the amendment. And you can see that basically when the situation is stable, like at the beginning, the demand is kind of stable and the price doesn't vary too much. The two are largely equal to each other. And then they only start differing if there is a sudden change in price. And this sudden change in price, you will see that the blue one directly change, while the orange one will react slower due to the lag in the TSO controller. And so when you have a discrepancy between the orange and the blue, basically that's again this situation where you have a bid that is selected by the activation optimization function, but is not activated by the TSO controller. And so what would be finally the impact of this? Well, as you can see, it would reduce the occurrence of short price incident, but it would have a limited impact on long price incidents. Now we can take some questions.
Thank you, Gilles. Let me turn on my camera. We have one question, and but before I get to that, I really invite anyone having any questions to put them into the Slido. I assume Gilles' explanation was very good, and there's no questions. But if you have them, please provide them so we can go through them in this presentation. Gilles, the first question is about the technical implementation deadline provided for these proposals by TSOs, and indeed about the technical readiness of the TSOs after our decision at maximum in August.
So the implementation timeline for this measure is so that the TSO have proposed in the amendment is the latest between 24th of July and 1 month after our decision. Meaning that if we take our decision after 24th of July, it's 1 month after our decision. If we after 24th of June, if we take our decision before 24th of June, then it will be on 24th of July. So I mean that will be implemented quite quickly, basically. So at the latest, basically by 24th of August, that will be implemented.
I see my request at least trigger some questions. So the next question, you need not every just taking them in order as they were asked. So the question is, what is the reason that the aFRR prices in Austria are as high anyway?
I mean, that is coming from the bidding of BSPs. I mean, if there are bids at high price and they are activated, that they will basically set the price.
Thank you, Gilles. And then indeed, a third question, as ACER checked on past price spikes, the extent to which each individual modification, elastic demand, dynamics, and price caps would have solved the issue. you partly showed this, but maybe you can
Yeah,
say something on this.
that's what we partially show. I mean, for the Italian situation, we show that the elastic demand would have mitigated most of the occurrence of price incidents. It would have also worked. I mean, this works extremely well if you have a certain amount of ATC available. So for price incidents where you have some ATCs available, the elastic demand will be very efficient. Or if you have ATCs, or if you have free bits. If you have one of the two, then the measure will be very, very efficient. If you don't have ATCs, then it will have a lower impact. And for the alternative way to compute the cross-border marginal price that was shown there, it will have a very positive. I mean, it will reduce quite a lot short price incident, but it will have a limited impact for longer price incident.
Thanks. And then a third one, and there's more coming. So could you provide a bit more reasoning why elastic demand would allow Terna not to activate the expensive Austrian bids?
Yeah, so that was here on this graph. Basically, so the current situation is basically the orange demand curve that is here. And what you can see is that if the demand in Italy exceed like 700 megawatts, then they will activate all the bids in Austria and in Italy and in Austria. And so the price will be set at the highest bid that is there. And usually it's an Austrian bid that is around 10,000 euro per megawatt hour. So that's the current situation. What the elastic demand would allow basically is that at around 500 megawatt, you have this red dashed vertical line, meaning that what TSO proposed is that for the parties before that, the demand has to be inelastic, but for the parties after that, they can set a given price. And here, let's say that they set a lower price than that, let's say 1,000 euro per megawatt hour. That means that they will not activate any of these bids that are higher than 1,000 euro per megawatt hour, and so the price will be lower than that. But that, yeah, that's how it will work basically.
Okay, good. Thanks, Gilles. So sorry, Gilles, I was briefly distracted because I get a signal that the Slido might not be working, but let's go with the questions we have and I'll check it in the background. So I think the next question is the non-contracted elastic part. So how will TSOs cover the non-contracted elastic part using local bids? Question mark.
So there are two options. So how will they cover this, basically this orange and white part? So then there are two, I mean, there are three options. So basically either if it's really short, they can not cover it because what's the requirement that is on them is to have the blue part available, and that's sufficient to have sufficient frequency quality. So they can decide not to cover it if it's short. If it's longer, then they can activate MFR. If it's a longer lasting process, at a point they can decide that they want to activate MFR. And if it's, or they can decide, I mean, MFR or any local specific product that they would have, but it can be MFR also. So that's basically the two main options that they have.
Thanks, Gilles. Maybe just to signal if you're having trouble accessing the Slido, then I recommend you just go to Slido and indeed use the hashtag ELE in Slido. That should work as well. But I hope it's working. At least we're getting questions in, so I assume it's working. So so Gilles, I think also time-wise we're good to go to the next, or should we spend more time here? Maybe we go to the next. If we get more questions later on this part, we can always go back. So let's go there indeed.
Okay. So the third topic was about transitional and technical price limits. And so there are a bit of a slide explaining what's the practical implementation of the current price limits and the one that are proposed by TSO. So currently what we have is the green situation. So we have until July 2026, the transitional price limit at 15,000 euro per megawatt hour. And then we will have the technical at 99,000 euro per megawatt hour after July 2026. And what TSO proposed is to move the transitional from 15,000 to 10,000 euro per megawatt hour. So that's before July 2026. and for after July 2026 to move from 99,000 euro per megawatt hour for the technical rate from 99,000 euro per megawatt hour to 15,000 euro per megawatt hour. And they will also add to this technique, because at the moment in the technical price limit, there's no adjustment mechanism. So they will also, when they reduce it to 15,000, they will they have proposed an to adjust it based on the evolution of the harmonized maximum minimum clearing price for single intraday coupling. So basically the intraday price limit. So they will have this adjustment to keep them coherent to ensure basically that the intraday price limit doesn't go above the balancing one. And they also propose in their submission to develop an adjustment mechanism that would account for price format balancing platforms and specificity of balancing market. And that they say, okay, they would be able to develop that and propose it by January 2026. And so a bit of legal background above price limits. So there are several articles discussing price limits. In the electricity regulation, there are Article 10.1 that says that there shall be neither a maximum nor a maximum limit to the wholesale electricity price, and this provision shall apply to bidding and clearing in all time frame and shall include balancing energy and imbalance prices. And then there is this article. There is also Article 10.2 that basically says that for the in intraday, NEMO shall implement a transparent mechanism to adjust automatically the technical bidding limit in case the set limits are expected to be reached. And then we have also Article 32 of the balancing regulation that says, okay, in case TSO identify that technical price limits are needed for efficient functioning of the market, they can propose harmonized maximum and minimum balancing energy prices, including bidding and clearing prices. And so they shall take into account the maximum and minimum clearing price for day and intraday time frame. And so what has been done now, because there have been recently an amendment of the day and intraday price limit, what is there at the moment now is that you have a price limit for this, and you have an adjustment mechanism in there that is based on day price and intraday that is based on intraday price. And so what we consider here is that it would be also acceptable to have the same thing in balancing, meaning we can have a harmonized maximum minimum price for balancing energy that has a lower value than the technical price limit, and that can be introduced if an adjustment mechanism is introduced based on transparent, if there is a mechanism that is introduced with that is transparent and includes some predefined triggering condition, basically. And so here we will look a bit at how can this adjustment mechanism be defined. And so let's first go back to what is done in intraday. What's done in intraday currently is that you have, so the idea is that you will adjust the price limit if the price reach 70% of the maximum price in intraday. So that's basically the threshold definition, the first condition. But you will not just do it if you have 1 in 10 of the price reaching 70% of the price limit. You will do it, and that's the second line of the table, if it happens in 2 different MTU over at least 2 different days in a rolling 30 days. And so if this happens, so if you have 2 incidents over 2 different days in the rolling 30 days period, then you will increase your intraday price limit, and then you start a transitional period of 28 days, for which at that time there is no possibility to trigger any price adjustment. So you will not look at the 2 above condition anymore for these 28 days, and then after these 28 days you will start looking to see if the triggering conditions are met. And so in intraday, if these triggering conditions are met, for the upward threshold, then you will increase it by 500 euro per megawatt hour, and for the downward threshold, you will reduce it by 100 euro per megawatt hour. And you also, what should also be seen is that compared to the red in intraday, you also have a specific condition based on the structure of intraday market, is that you only look at triggers in auction in intraday. You don't look at trigger in the continuous segment of intraday, and the reason for that is that you have much more variation in the continuous segment that are not linked to any market fundamental, and that's why the decision has been taken there to not account for price incident in this situation. And now if we look at what's done there in intraday, we can try to see how we can have something for balancing. And so for most of this, actually, there is no reason to change to change it compared to what we have in intraday. For instance, for the threshold definition at 70%, for the spike for the triggering condition that you need 2 different MTU in 2 different days over 30 days, as well as the step for increase. There is no specific reason to change it for balancing. What needs to be different, obviously, it's the last line, which is the specific condition of intraday market, because there we will have specific conditions that are linked to balancing market. And that's what we've tried to do after, is to try to see, okay, what could be the specific condition for balancing markets. And there we have observed that we have been able to identify some of them. And so the first one is that you have different type of market participants and that faces different prices in balancing market, because you have aFRR BSPs that are exposed to aFRR cross-border marginal prices. You have MFR BSPs that are facing the MFR cross-border marginal price, and you have BRPs that face the imbalance price, basically. And the settlement granularity of these different price can be different. So for aFRR, it's 4 seconds, while for MFR and for the imbalance price, it's basically 15 minutes. And from this specificity, what we have realized actually is that in day and intraday, if a certain clearing price is reached, it means that a supplier was ready to sell at that price and that there was a buyer that was ready to pay that price. And the reason for that is that both suppliers and demand can trade at the same granularity and price. And in balancing, actually, we realized that this is different, because it's not because the cross-border marginal price reached a certain level for a 4-second period that a BRP was ready to pay that price, because that BRP did not have the possibility to react on that 4-second price, but can only react on the 15-minute price. And so that's why, from this specificity, what we have concluded is that for MFR, we can take indeed as a price to consider the cross-border marginal price for the 15-minute, but for aFRR, it would not be meaningful to just look at a 4-second price, because it's not because the price for 4 seconds reached 12,000 euro per megawatt-hour that there was any BRP that was willing to pay that price. And so that's why for aFRR, we would take the weighted average of the cross-border marginal prices during the imbalance settlement period. And actually, that also connects to the imbalance settlement harmonization methodology and to the balancing regulation, because this is the lower bound for the computation of the imbalance price. And so we are sure that the BRP are exposed to that price. The second condition that we have identified, and it's illustrated in the 2 graphs here, where there on the left graph you have a clearing in PICASSO, and the right graph you have a clearing in MARI for the same imbalance settlement period. And that's a situation that can basically arise, is that on the left graph you can see that the clearing PICASSO gives a very high price, and it can even be for during the 15 minutes. But on MARI, actually, you have actually quite low price, and and that's what you see on the right graph. You had quite a lot of supply that was available at relatively cheap prices. And so there, that can trigger a question, which is, I mean, would it be meaningful to increase the cross-border, to increase the price limit if there was still a lot of cheap supply available that have not been activated? Would it be coherent to take that as a trigger? And so there our answer was that no, it would be, to have a real scarcity situation, you need to have a high price in both platforms, and that's why we take a specific condition that the trigger should take place both in PICASSO and in MARI for the same 15-minute period or imbalance settlement period, because it would not be meaningful to increase the price limit if there was at that time still a lot of supply that was available. And that, again, you can connect that to day and intraday. That does not happen in day and intraday, because if you have supply available, as you have only one platform, then it will be matched. While in balancing, it's really coming from the fact that you have both PICASSO and MARI that act completely independently of each other and that can have completely different prices. And the third specific condition that have been considered is that the adjustment mechanism, I mean, it would be possible that it's not triggered if the price formation was put into question due to a lack of competition in the market. And so this condition can take 2 forms. So either an ex-ante condition that would check if some indicators of the competitivity of the market was met. So let's say if there was high market concentration or if there was existence of pivotal BSPs. And the other form that the condition can take would be an ex-post assessment on whether the cross-border marginal prices that would lead to the adjustment arise from an efficient price formation, basically whether the offer from BSP reflects marginal cost and including opportunity costs. And so there the idea would be that if one of these two type of conditions would show that the price that triggered the adjustment was put into question because there was few competition, then there would be no adjustment. So basically for this, what we are asking you is what's your view on this third condition, and if such condition would be added, would you prefer if it's under the form of an ex ante condition or of an ex post assessment? And that's all for this part. So we can take question again.
Yes, thank you, Gilles. Maybe first an apology is in order. I also see it now on this slide. So please do not use the link on the slide. Use the link in the chat. That one should work. And if even that doesn't work, please use the hashtag ELE, and then your question should come in. I've received, maybe Gilles, I received now. I have two questions which I think were still related to the previous. I propose to take those first, and then I will continue with the questions for the second Q&A session. Indeed, also giving people the time to submit some more questions. So first on the first part was the question whether we analyze the different local frequency restoration control speed. Some TSOs might be faster than others. I think we can answer that one. You go ahead.
Yeah, so we have not, been looking into that into detail, but it's true that you will have some that will be faster and some that will be slower, and that will impact the way this works. That's in the case, but we have not made a precise assessment on how fast do the controllers react. But what is clear is that they react less fast than the input to the activation optimization function. That's exactly what would reduce the occurrence of short price incidents.
Thank you, Gilles. Then the next one is, we mentioned that the measure would have mitigated most of the Italian price incidents. I think you briefly touched upon it, but maybe good to explain it again. Can you quantify the most? How many are not solved and why?
It's this slide basically. Based on, we have not looked into detail. We have looked like qualitatively to how it works, but not exactly on. We are not able to resimulate all the clearing of PICASSO. But if we look based on the analysis that had been made by AFRR, where they basically commented that for in the downward direction there was 98, if I remember correctly, 98% of price incidents that occur when their merit order was exhausted. Basically, this 98% would be solved by using an elastic demand at a lower level. So that's for the downward direction. For the upward direction, I don't remember exactly, and I don't even look into detail why the two other person would not be solved, honestly.
And I think I would add, it would resemble the current situation. So if you currently solve these incidents with other means, then yeah, you could solve them. Good. Then I propose to go to the questions coming from for the second Q&A, Gilles. So first question is, but by the way, also one on the first session. So which entity would set the price cap in the elastic demand version based on which rules?
So on this case, there is no price cap because you see in the first part here, the first horizontal line is at 15 euro per megawatt hour, which is the highest. The value of the transitional price limit, and that would increase if the price limit would become higher in the future. So there is no price cap that is set here. It's just the fact that for the second horizontal line, the TSO can reflect their willingness to pay for higher frequency quality, and so that would be defined by TSOs.
I think it's indeed on the second part, Gilles. So I seem to remember that there's local rules on this, right? And the need to publish these local rules.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
Okay. Good, thanks. Then another question. So do you expect these adjustments to impact the timeline of national markets? And I think that these adjustments are here now, the second part, adjustments indeed. Do you expect these adjustments to impact the timeline of national markets meant to be joining PICASSO over the course of the year? Maybe it's made of a general question on all,
yeah, for this one, I mean, the adjustment, we've also looked at what impact it has. For instance, there was the idea of lowering the transitional price limit from 15,000 to 10,000 euro per megawatt hour, because I mean, so for the technical, I mean, basically there is no impact because that will only apply in 2026. So there is no impact on whether you connect 3 months earlier or later, because on whether you connect, at which point you connect in 2025, because as it arrives in 2026, there cannot be an impact of that. And for the transitional price limit moving, as we have seen that most price incidents already now are lower than 10,000 euro or 10,000 euro per megawatt hour or lower. So lowering the price limit from 15 to 10 would not have much impact on the market essentially. So these two measures are not supposed to influence the connection to PICASSO anyway.
So, thank you, Gilles. Then I go to the next one, which I think is again back to the previous part on the dimensioning. So do the aFRR dimensioning rules foresee something about the ratio of aFRR and MFR to be dimensioned by the TSOs, or are the rules only about the entire FRR to be dimensioned by the TSO?
So indeed, the rule of the 99% is for the FRR, and there is also a rule for the split of aFRR and MFR, is that they shall this split should ensure that they can respect their FRC target parameters when it's required, basically. Because there are some FRC target parameters, and so TSO need to be able to meet them, and this split should allow them to do that. So it's a more indirect rule, basically. There is not a specific condition on how they should make the split, but there is an indirect one based on the fact that they have to respect their FRC target parameters.
Thank you, Gilles. Here, I have a question on the trigger on the price caps. There can be cases in which the imbalance is solely solved by one of the reserves, aFRR or MFR. Shouldn't the price cap be revised accordingly in those cases?
So there, the idea is that is solely solved by one of the reserve here, but the point here is that if, let's say, there was no activation, I mean, the reason for which, I mean, what has been argued in intraday basically is that and what is also written in the electricity regulation is that you increase the price limit if that the set limits are expected to be reached, basically. And when it's expected to be reached, if it happened only in one product and not in the two product, you cannot really consider that the price limit is expected to be reached, because if the TSO would have activated in an alternative way, there would have not been any trigger of the price. And that's why this condition that's why you have to look at price incident in both products at the same time and not only in one product.
Okay, good. Thanks, Gilles. I see some more challenging questions coming now, so I think people are getting going on the question. So maybe a question by Paul Giesperts is: will the issue of proactive balancing TSOs be tackled at some time? Proactive TSOs can capture the most attractive bids before a reactive TSO becomes active. Maybe it's good to mention one thing here. We've not addressed specifically the topic of the replacement reserve project in this. We will definitely look into this because it's it's also a platform. It's part of a different process. So indeed, there's less interaction between RR and FRR in that respect. So we're mainly focusing on the FRR framework and the interaction between the two in the same process. And the RR is indeed a bit of a different process. So maybe that first, because that is the main distinction between a proactive and reactive balancing TSOs. On the effect within within the aFRR process. Indeed, on one side, it is true that that some TSOs might be using MFR before aFRR. At the same time, we do see that that joining the aFRR platform makes the use of these reserves more harmonized in that sense. There's more TSOs actually using aFRR because it's simply there and simply available. And we do expect indeed those two processes to align more and more when TSOs start joining similar platforms. Although at the same time saying we are indeed looking at a price cap, a price increase only if both are used at the same time. And that sense, by that, indeed, looking at similar uses across the two. So that on that one. Maybe one going back to Gilles on a question on the elastic demand. So I understood that the elastic demand can be satisfied by MFR or specific products. Are we sure we are not incentivizing specific balancing products at national level while implementing elastic demand? Maybe you can say something on this, Gilles.
Yeah, we are not. I mean, they can. So if they use elastic demand and they don't satisfy their whole demand, then they can either, I mean, there are two options: either they let it or they use another reserve that they have available. And so that can be MFR or local product if they have it available, but that doesn't mean that they have to define a local product to cover that. I mean, they can just use MFR. So if they have a local product already now, they can use it for that if they see that it's appropriate. If they don't have, they don't need to define any specific product. So we don't give an incentive to add specific products.
Although I would say that there could be an interaction on the price level you set linked to those specific products, but I think that's exactly the point, right? If you have cheaper, well, above a certain level, something cheaper, then maybe that's indeed what would drive this price limit.
But it works perfectly the same with MFR somehow.
Indeed.
You don't need to have a specific product for that.
Good. Then I see another a bit of outside topic as such. A question by Luca who's asking, is ACER willing to discuss alternative pricing regimes like pay-as-bid, accompanied by much lower price caps, at least for an intermediary period? And will ACER be ready to engage in discussion over the CBMP? Maybe first a formal and then a content discussion. So first, a decision on ACER side is based on a proposal by TSOs. So we'll look into a proposal submitted by TSOs. And indeed a discussion on the cross-border marginal price. And to be honest, I'll say something on the content. That is not on the table for us at this point in time. The other side is inside a European platform and in European exchange, we see it very hard to find a proper solution for settling for market design aspects with a different scheme than cross-border marginal pricing or marginal pricing in general, because in the end you need to have some mechanism and settlement between. We do see that there's indeed some concerns. There's some need for market participants to get used to these new schemes, but we do hope that expanding the platform to a larger amount of markets will make competition develop and indeed get everyone getting more used to these mechanisms. In general, I think our position on marginal pricing and the topics and discussion related to it is indeed very well reflected in our April paper of a few years ago, where we had, of course, similar discussions when the energy crisis hit Europe. So maybe that on that one. Then maybe Gilles, the next one is someone you can take, and I see another two coming. So maybe we take those three and then we try to wrap up. So a question is, do you consider to make the definition of the elastic demand compulsory for TSOs?
Yeah, that would be very difficult to do because the value of the second horizontal part, so the part that is elastic, there is a need to put a price. and there somehow reflects something that is national, is the willingness to pay for higher frequency quality. And there it would be very difficult for us to say what to force a given value to TSOs there. So I mean, it seems logical that as this value reflect their willingness to pay, they decide what their willingness to pay rather than us imposing on them what they should put there.
And indeed, I think maybe to add, we also do not consider a European definition of what they need to put in there. It's indeed, there's local freedom on doing it. There's even local freedom of not using the elastic demand part if you want to. Yeah. So then I have a question on Italy. Again, what if the main problem leading to the high price spikes of PICASSO should be addressed at national level in the process of converting specific into standard energy bids by the TSO, Terna? Is there ACER intention to tackle this aspect before Terna will rejoin the platform? I don't know, do you want to take this, Gilles, or should I?
I mean, I can give a first answer and then you can complement, because what we have seen mainly is that what was causing the issue is that the fact that the demand exceed the bids that are brought to the platform and the merit order also of Austria, basically. Then that was the thing that was triggering prices, and that's what we are solving here. That doesn't mean that on the side there could be other improvement that can be made.
And I think maybe to add the whole process of converting the bids, the integrated scheduling bids in the Italian system is quite specific to Terna, and I also assume that is something national to be looked into, also with respect to the transparency around that. Then, and I think I'll say this is the last question. And I see two other questions currently in my moderation, but I'll offer to answer them in written after the webinar. So the main idea of the implementation is I want as TSO volume just if it will settle below a target price. Otherwise, I can activate other sources. Correct. If it is the case, the other sources will be part of the AOF in order to compute for the maximization of social welfare.
So for the first part, I can activate other sources. That's partially true indeed. So they can activate MFR. That's true. That they have an alternative. Or they can also decide not to activate anything and having a slightly lower frequency quality. So these are the two options. And the other source will be part of the AOF. No, they will not be part of the AOF. I mean, somehow what's happening there is, I mean, if you want to look at, if you just disregard the option of lower frequency quality, but you just look at the opportunity of activating something else, basically what TSO would be bidding there is the opportunity cost of activating something else. But that means that they just reflect that as an opportunity cost, and the AOF runs just like that. And the way after or they activate something else happen in a separate process.
Indeed. Good. Thanks, Gilles. If you can go to the last slide, which yes. I think is saying closing remarks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. So I thank you all for participating in this webinar today. So as shown by Gilles, I think in the coming period, there's still a possibility for you to submit your input to our public consultation on the topic. I hope this webinar gave you a bit of more insight of what the decision and what the work is about, and what we will be looking into. Indeed, of course, the main focus on our side is to get the PICASSO platform and subsequently also the MARI platform running, getting most TSOs to join it, and you need to use it for their balancing processes. The figures that the TSO already showed in terms of welfare benefits, of cost reduction for consumers is already quite significant. We can understand that indeed for some countries seeing prices like this is something to get used to, but we would indeed like to emphasize again that those platforms are a huge cost saver for European consumers in the end, because balancing as such, balancing the system is done at lower cost. So indeed, the joining of the platform is indeed an important part. And we do hope that these mitigation measures will take away a bit of the hesitance on TSO side to join those platforms, and we need to make them work to join them as much as possible before the legal deadline in July this year. But of course, if that is not possible, shortly after. So this is what we'll be working on in the current comment period. Happy to indeed receive your input. And with that, I would close today's webinar. Thank you for your participation, and we'll see you all online or somewhere else. Thank you.